Good afternoon, and thank you very much for being invited here. So, a little bit about my background for those of you that don't know me. I have, throughout all my academic life, been involved with injury prevention, and then in particular the prevention of whiplash injuries in car occupancy. But injury prevention, very broadly, is close to my heart. And I'm an engineer, so I look at this from an engineering perspective. And in addition to being a research director at VTI, I'm also adjunct professor at Chalmers University. And currently I'm out here as a visiting professor at Monash University at the Accident Research Center, so that coincided with this event. So I will start with show you a little bit of where I'm coming from. So there will be some statistics from Sweden and Australia, and then I will describe more in detail how we collect data, and in particular about the cyclists and single crashes, and then finishing off with describing a pilot project where we take knowledge from, in this case, the area of vehicle safety and motorcycle safety, and apply that to the bicycles. So Sweden, population nearly 10 million people. We live mainly in the south. We have distinct summers and winters, and we have a climate in the south that is similar to that of Scotland. So we are heavily influenced by the Gulf Stream. So if you look at the globe on the same latitude in Canada, that would be a totally different climate than the one that we have. I looked up some figures to compare Australia and Sweden, and this is from the ACRS report, figures from 2014. And for Australia, here you have 4.9 persons killed for every 100,000, and in Sweden that same figure would be 2.8. So there is quite a substantial difference in the risk on the population basis. Then, of course, you can compare in different ways, kilometer driven and so on, but still there is a higher risk in Australia than in Sweden. What you see also here in this graph is, if you look at the cyclists, then you see the proportion of cyclists killed of the total is there's a quite big difference between Sweden and Australia. And other big difference is proportion of unknown, other including unknown. So in some ways, similar pattern with the number of passenger occupants, but also some differences. So how do we do this in Sweden when it comes to data about crashes and injuries? We have, since 2000, year 2000, both police reported data and data from the hospital in the same database. So we link those data sets together, so we get the information from the police and from the hospital. And here you see an example from Gothenburg, my hometown. And of course you will have a lot of crashes happening that only the police reports about, because there were no injuries, and you will have crashes where the police has not been involved, which are, whether we're talking about cyclists, mainly single crashes. You run off the road, you lose control for one or another reason, nobody else is involved, and therefore it's not a matter for the police. And you can see here the proportion of the different types of crashes reported in both databases, only police reported and only hospital reported. And nearly all of the only hospital reported are single crashes. As I said, we have this database where we have both police reported data and hospital data, and then in addition, all fatalities are in-depth investigated, and you have access to that data as well. This is about fatalities, but what is the picture when you look at different types of severities? This is one way of categorizing that. That's a permanent medical impairment. Permanent medical impairment, 10% or higher, is the highest grade of impairment in these classification schemes. And this is an impairment that will affect your everyday life. So each day of your life you will be affected by this injury. And if you remember the graphical representation of proportion, now it looks quite different, because as you see, those injured in vehicles and those cyclist injuries are on a similar magnitude. However, of course, it's very, very different in type of injuries. For car occupants, it's whiplash injuries that totally dominate. Low severity impacts that cause injuries to the neck. When it comes to bicycles, in Sweden we don't have the same favorable situation as you have here, where you all wear bicycle helmets. So for bicycles you have a lot of brain injuries, but also injuries to the shoulder, arm, and to your legs. These are what causes the permanent medical impairment. Looking then at the injuries and the difference between hospital data and police reported data for cyclists in particular. And here you see the hospital reported accident. We have 71% is single crashes. And when you look at police reported accident, then if you only have that set of data, you will have the picture that, oh, this is to do with collisions with vehicles, because that is where the police is involved. So 68% would be bicycle crashes, and only 16% single bicycle crashes. So this highlights the importance to have access to, of course, both of these pictures to get the overall picture. So some example of what we have done in Sweden and in Europe, and this is in the area of infrastructure. Changing from intersections to roundabout is of course done for a number of reasons. It's about getting down the speed when there's a vehicle-to-vehicle collision. It's about a different angle than the 90 degree to get it more like this, favorable in terms of energy absorption. But also it's an opportunity to design the bike lanes and the infrastructure for the bicyclists differently, as has been done in this case. Another way is, of course, separation of road users. This is a model used quite often in Sweden, where you have pedestrian, bicyclists, parked cars, and then moving cars outside the parked cars. There are different ways of doing this, I'm aware of. This is what we often use. And then the totally different, opposite thing than to separate is the shared space. You share the space that is available. This is example for several places in Europe where pedestrian, bicyclists, those in vehicles of different types all share the space. And of course, this is only possible when you have very low velocities, but it's also a very different type of interaction between the user of the space. So finally, I will show you, the video here is about one test that we did with an inflatable helmet. For you that all wear helmet, I know I can understand that if this is maybe not a big thing, but in those countries where legislation of that kind has not been able to get through, then inflatable helmets for some can be quite attractive. But the purpose of the testing here is another one in this project, but because we will look at the influence of ABS on bicycles. And the influence here is a short history about ABS, developed for vehicles initially, then transferred into motorcycles, where it has shown to have a really good effect. And an effect that wasn't thought of when ABS was developed, because it turned out that it increased stability of a vehicle with a vehicle with only two wheels. When you have four, that's not an issue. When you have two and you're braking and you have ABS, you increase the stability. In recent years, when it comes to cycles, then a big limitation has often been the weight. You cannot add anything that adds weight. But now with electrical bikes, that has become quite popular and increasing in popularity in Europe and other parts of the world, then all of a sudden we can start to apply technology and knowledge from other areas. So we will make a repeatable test setup. That's why I show a crash test here, because it's not about having bicyclists using the bike. We want a repeatable test setup where we can test different types of ABS, and of course with and without ABS. We do this with folks on insurance, the company that has a lot of detailed knowledge, addition to the knowledge that I showed you before about national data, and then a bicycle manufacturer. So these tests will be done later this year, and next time I'm out here as a visiting professor in February, March, we should have some preliminary results. So that's all for me. Thank you for your attention. Very interesting question. I'm not an expert on this myself. I'm aware of that there are some really strong opinions here. However, it is our experience and in Europe and in Sweden. France also being one of the examples where it reduces the risk of injuries enormously. It might, I don't know at all if this is the case, but it might be that sometimes it's a confusion between crashes and injuries. So if you count crashes, then you can end up with higher number of crashes in a roundabout. But that's okay as long as it doesn't cause injuries, because we can repair cars. We have factories for that. We don't have factories for people, and we know how difficult it is to repair. If we need to, and even with the best of our efforts, we don't come that far. So if you count crashes, then you would say, oh, it's much better off with an intersection. Those crashes that will occur in higher velocity and with more severe injuries. In roundabouts, you will have lower severe crashes and more material damages. I don't know if that is one of the underlying data points here, but it might be. Yeah, that's one thing that is still very difficult, I assume, both in Australia, but definitely in Sweden, to get a clear picture of how many kilometers cycling you have. Because when it comes to vehicles, we can monitor the petrol used in the car in the country, and have that as a normalized for that. But we still lack that accurate data. In comparison to other European countries like Denmark and Holland, we still have some catching up to do. We haven't been that in front when it comes to cycling, but there is probably a bit longer tradition of having this as an integrated part, as you say, when you build any new infrastructure or rebuild, that taking bicyclists into consideration. Or as part, they are a transport, that's a transport mode, and you have to provide for that as well.